guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review of The Golem and the Jinni by Helen. This is an adult historical fantasy that takes place in New York City in 1899, and it follows two main characters, obviously the Golem and the Jinni. The Golem is Hava, and she has been created by a man to be his bride in the new world, but something ends up happening to him on the way over, and so she is left without a master, and she has to learn to navigate life without a master, where a golem is created to just follow a master, and now she's kind of left adrift. And then we have Ahmad, who is a genie, and he has been woken up in New York City after being trapped in his, what is it called? Lantern, sort of. It's not a lantern, this was more of like a flask, but anyway, it's kind of like the genie lantern, for 1,000 years, and then he has to kind of navigate New York City. And eventually, over time, their paths cross and everything, but really it's a story of them as individuals learning about the world and just trying to kind of, it's almost like a coming of age story without being coming of age because they're adults, but I'll get into it. Everything kind of goes from there in New York City. So I actually listened to this book on audiobook, and I highly recommend doing that. This book has been sitting on my shelf forever because I heard it was good for fans of the Night Circus, which I totally agree for once. And that's because they're very, very different, but their writing styles are similar, and just the characters and the like development and a lot of things are similar, like composition wise and like themes and stuff, but not necessarily actual like plot points or like world building or anything. Anyway, so this has been sitting on my shelf forever, and I finally decided to listen to it on audiobook because I have a really long commute now some days. So I highly recommend, because the narrator is amazing, and he really helped with the world building as well. I'm not sure how it would be necessarily in print version. I think it'd still be wonderful because the writing is really wonderful, but he helped with like all of the accents and just like everybody's kind of way of life and stuff. You really do follow two different distinct cultures within New York City at the time. You're following the Jewish community as well as the Syrian community, and you're seeing kind of how the cultures work. You're seeing their folklore, because again, these two creatures are from those different cultural backgrounds, and you kind of get to see the myths around that, the myths around their religions, and how magic in this world is a thing, but it's not an in-your-face thing. So it definitely still is our world in the past, but these things that everyone talks about as being fake are actually real, but they're very minute. They're not a constant thing. It's not like there's constantly creatures and stuff like that. These are the only two that you really come in contact with. You just hear about like the history of their unique cultures as kind of like creatures as well. Next, I'm going to talk about the characters. Both Hava and Ahmad are just wonderful characters that you grow to love so much. I did find myself at times getting frustrated with both of them, but for good reason, because they are such realistic, well fleshed out, flawed characters, and they are so human even though they're technically not human. And they really balance the other one out well. Again, the whole focus is not on their friendship whatsoever, because that doesn't start happening until later, but they are kind of polar opposites in ways. Hava is definitely a more subdued, tries to kind of keep it together, is really a lot about control and about, you know, not being selfish, and she can hear other people's thoughts as a golem and their wishes, and she has a desire to like fulfill other people's wishes, and she has to learn to kind of control that as well. She just wants to help people, and she's very focused on other people and making them comfortable and just being very obedient, where Ahmad is very much like kind of as you would imagine a genie and like the whole fire thing. He's very like all-consuming. He can be incredibly selfish at times. He's very rash, and he makes very quick decisions, and he just lives his life for like the pleasure of it, and he gets very easily bored, and like he's just a completely different kind of person. And they both are learning how to exist in these worlds that they really don't understand, in these cultures that they don't quite understand, and interacting with their communities and how their communities interact with them. And it's just lovely. And the side characters are really great as well. That's the thing that kind of reminded me of the Night Circus. If you read the Night Circus, you know that the setting itself is kind of a character, and that's kind of true of New York in this. But also the individual side characters are really important. And as time goes on, they kind of are woven into the story until you get towards the end and they all become like a huge part of everything. And that is true for this as well. You get these little snippets of these side characters' lives and how they impact the lives of Hava and Ahmad, and like all of them kind of woven together, and how like ripple effects happen and stuff. And that just reminded me so much of the Night Circus, and I love that about these kinds of stories, about following these kinds of not really slice of life, but you follow these, it feels kind of like a family saga in a way, because these cultures are kind of like little miniature families, and you get these looks into these people's lives and their backstories and how they got here and how they interact with everyone and their personalities. I just love that. I will say going into this, because I feel like you kind of need to warn people of this, since it is recommended for people that enjoy the Night Circus, and the Night Circus has a romantic element to it, I wouldn't go into this expecting a romance at all. This is not about romance whatsoever. I feel like the romantic elements are very, very, very small and not even necessarily between our main characters. And so if you're going into this expecting like a really whirlwind romance thing, you're probably going to be really disappointed, but that's not really what this is about. Again, it's about culture, and it's about family, and it's about different kinds of love and all these kinds of things. So don't go into it with like a romance spin on it, because that's not really what this is about. Lastly, we'll talk about the plot. Like I said, because this is so character driven and we're seeing all these different side characters, we're getting this wonderful world building, we're getting all of these like cultures and stuff, this is a slower story, I'd say. But again, reading it on audio was so great, because you just felt, it just feels so atmospheric, and the narrator is so good. Like I said, he does the accent so well, and it just immerses you in the story, and it feels so nice, and it's just like a warm, fuzzy feeling. But again, I feel like it could be kind of slower paced at times. I feel like if you favor one of the characters over the other, you're going to want to get into the other one's perspective again and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I loved all the characters. I love learning everything. I love the cultural stuff. I love the religious aspects of it, because obviously both of these characters are kind of part of their various religions and those different cultures and stuff. So I loved all of that, and I think it wove together beautifully. There is an element of these like antagonists in here. Again, I hesitate to almost call them villains, although these villains are more villainous in this book than the villains in the Night Circus, because I find the Night Circus villains to be more antagonists than villains. These lean a little more villainous than antagonists, but have that same kind of flavor of like you sort of almost understand, and that whole like villain thing is a really big part of the plot as well, and about like the build up, and again weaving all of these characters together to just show you the final product of like the big, you know, kind of bang out ending is really wonderful. So I highly, highly recommend this book, obviously. I loved it. Again, if you're a fan of the Night Circus, I don't think this would disappoint you. I know a lot of books get compared to the Night Circus. This has very similar, like, themes and writing feel, but I wouldn't say it has a similar, like, plot. But it has that kind of, like, magic it can be around every corner, and you know, what's real and what's fake kind of thing, and that's what I really love about this, and the characters are lovely, lovely, lovely. So I gave The Golem and the Jinni 5 out of 5 stars. So comment below and let me know what you thought of The Golem and the Jinni. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye!